Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Boom Comic Source collaboration. It's your DC Spotlight for the week of May 21st, 2024. It's a few days away from Phoenix Fan Fusion, Phoenix Fan Fest, formerly known as Phoenix Comic Con. So, Rocky be in town. Can't wait. We are hosting panels if you're going to be at the show. Several panels. So, first of all, we have an X-Men panel on Friday night. It's kind of late, 9 p.m. We get that. That was the time they gave us. But we're basically going to be talking about different eras of the X-Men. We'll touch on the movies and obviously X-Men 97 as well. But yeah, we're just going to go over, and we know it's fluid. Your eras may not line up with our eras and what have you, but we're going to talk about kind of the different eras, the big events during those eras, the first appearances and what have you. So just be a big kind of general overview about the X-Men. I'm hosting a panel or moderating a panel for Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman on Saturday, all about Venom. So if you've read Donny Cates and Stegman's Venom panel, it's mostly going to be about their run, but we'll talk some Venom in general as well. And then I'm also hosting a panel on Sunday about how to write a comic book script. So that's happening. So looking forward to all of that. There's going to be some big announcements at the show as well. So look for those coming. It's just going to be a really fun time. So we'll be at the show. If you want to meet up, if you're a listener or viewer or what have you, you want to meet up, maybe get yourself a cool Comic Source lanyard. Just hit us up on social media. We'll be there. I think probably most of the day, all 3 days, maybe not Sunday, but we'll see. We'll play by ear. But anyway, all that being said, looking forward to it. It's an interesting week of DC books. I thought for the most part, pretty strong. There are some books that underwhelmed here as I'm looking through. One, two, maybe three books that kind of underwhelmed me out of the 11. But for the most part, I don't know. Pretty solid. What do you think, Rocky?
Yeah, it was okay. There was maybe three, maybe four that I really enjoyed, and the rest were sort of like meh. Nothing really offended me. One bored me to death, but nothing really like. It was an okay week. It was an okay week, and a couple of standouts. One related to a recent interview with Brian Busalat. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Brian Busalato. How do you say his last name?
Yeah, Buchalato. He goes by Booch, Brian Booch.
Brian Booch. Yeah, well, it was a good interview, and I looked. It whetted my appetite for the final issue of Justice League and Godzilla, and I'm looking forward to talking about that. It was enjoyable.
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. We'll start it off with Titans, number 11, written by Tom Taylor. Lucas Meyer is the artist. Adriana Lucas on colors. Wes Abbott on letters. Darkwing Queen, Part 4. And this is where I start to wonder about how much absolute power in the events and what have you of that kind of can interrupt things. Like we're excited for it, don't get me wrong. It sounds like it's going to be great, but you worry about how other things are affected by it. Obviously, we've seen a lot of Amanda Waller in Titans lately, but the focus lately has been on Raven and how she's been replaced by her kind of demon-like version. And we've kind of mentioned several times that we thought that some of the Titans should have been a little more suspicious than they are. Well, we had no clues that they were actually suspicious until this particular issue. And then it becomes clear that at least Nightwing is very suspicious. So I kind of like the idea that Nightwing has this kind of interesting way to secretly sort of keep track of or kind of bounce ideas off of himself, off of his own kind of psyche. Not that I want to get into the whole Batman Zur-En-Ah thing with everybody, but I found that to be interesting. The other part of the story is with Amanda Waller and with Professor Tio Morrow and with this new, I guess she's a villain. She aspired to be a hero, always dreamed of being a Titan growing up. Tio Morrow gave her some abilities. She volunteered for this project at Star Labs. She died. She had a heart attack. Unbeknownst to her, they took her brain. They put it in a robotic body. She doesn't even know she's a robot. And she's been told that the Titans are actually imposters. They're monsters that are holding the real Titans hostage, and she goes there and attacks them it's all a little bit paint by the numbers. It's all sort of generic. Um, but half the issues dedicated to that, if not more. And again, it just feels like set up for absolute power. So I'm a little more interested in kind of the Raven and that part of it, but it feels like that part of the story takes a little bit of a backseat to what is set up for absolute power. So yeah, not my favorite issue. Um, we've talked in the past about having some issues with the pacing of Teen Titans. If there's anything to make it go slower, it's take half the real estate that Tom Taylor does have, which he, you could make the argument he's not being the most efficient with anyway, because it's taken him a long time to get to the point on his own stories. Now take away half his real estate and say, hey, this needs to be dedicated to the build up to absolute power. Things slow down even more. So it's an okay issue. There's nothing, technically wrong with it in terms of, being a comic. And I suppose I'm just being a little bit nitpicky because, think back to when things were ramping up in DC way back in the early to mid 80s, getting ready for Crisis on Infinite Earths, and this kind of stuff would happen. You look back on that stuff and I don't necessarily, pick it apart. So, maybe it's just because it has been so slow up to this point. And if it had been moving along a little faster, then maybe I don't mind the slowdown. But I think it's part of it. Part of the dislike of the pacing for me is the fact that the whole thing has been slow throughout, and now we're slowing down even more. So again, it's not a bad comic, and I am glad to see that some of the Titans do have their suspicions about Raven. So we'll see where it goes from there. This new character, what's her name, Vidalia or whatever?
Vanadia,
yeah.
Vanadia.
Yeah, again, she seems kind of paint by the numbers to me. She doesn't seem particularly interesting. So I do like the way she looks visually. I think Lucas Meyer did a good job of making her look interesting from a visual standpoint. But yeah, other than that, a little bit generic. So what were your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, it's nice to know that Dick Grayson's not a complete idiot, and I like the Zur-En-Arr-esque nature of it. Although he goes out of his way to, in his narration, Dick Grayson, to say that even though he's accessing a different part of his mind, I think he's utilizing a combination of computer technology and AI, along with a little bit of his own sort of, I don't know, mental training to. It's not Zur-En-Arr, it's Serkinar, not Zarnar. And it's a way for him to access a private part of his mind so that Raven cannot sort of be aware that he's exploring his suspicions. So it's interesting that Dick Grayson, who was, of course, trained as a detective by Batman, of course, this is a way that that Dick Grayson sort of evaluates a situation. And you actually see a lot of this in... I just read a brilliant, wonderful comic book graphic novelization. I can't remember the author of it, but it's called The Mind of Sherlock Holmes, and it shows the entire comic book is how the mind of Sherlock Holmes works. And Sherlock Holmes often, he would often be seen as sort of how he thinks in his own mind is very analytical and interesting. And I like how this in this issue it's broken down, and there's 2 full pages of Dick Grayson sort of literally talking to himself in his own head, working through his analysis and the evidence that suggests that maybe Raven isn't her, maybe Raven isn't herself, or maybe is it Rachel, or is it this is it her darker half? And I really like that aspect of it. I thought it worked well. And I actually, even though I thought that the Raven exploring her dark half and the dark-winged queen, I'm actually more interested in it now because of this issue. And what I find fascinating is that the Darkwing Queen here, she doesn't want to lose the Titans. She considers the Titans to be her, almost like her generals. She doesn't want to lose her generals. Raven gets literally basically impaled by Vanadia, and it looks like a death blow. I don't know how she can survive, but I mean, I guess Raven's lucky that the Darkwing Queen is the one who gets attacked, because the Darkwinged Queen, she has to enter her darker realm in order to save herself and to heal herself from her wounds. And she does seem to be quite obsessed with the idea that the Titans are her generals. And I sort of like that idea, that the fact that even though she's evil, she still has her agenda, whatever that might be exactly, but she also cares for the Titans, but she also refers to them as her generals. So she's probably a control freak and has her evil agenda, and yet slowly I think that the power of friendship and maybe the love of Gar, she's slowly starting to be humanized, or she's starting to feel the effects of human emotion. That's really starting to shine through more and more. As for Venadia herself, the origin of Venadia, I actually like the fact that Tom Taylor just gave us a quick rundown of it. We didn't need to have 10 issues of giving us the origin of this character. And while it's very by the numbers, it does seem to work. I will say that the power set of Venadia, while I'm not entirely clear, she was made by the scientific genius of Dr. Mora, who created Red Tornado, and she does seem to be extremely powerful. She even seems to have access to boom tube technology. At one point, Raven sort of teleports her into space, but she boom tubes back very quickly to impale Raven with her hand that turns into a sword. So it's pretty impressive. So I thought that the battle scenes were pretty cool. The art was pretty good. It was, well, this was one of the better comics. Lucas Meyer does a really good job on the art. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed reading it. It flowed better. I liked it felt like it had a little bit more substance than a lot of Taylor's recent Titans issues have had. It finally feels that, somebody's actually doing some thinking. It just, I like to see Dick Grayson not being, I like him showing a little bit of more, I like seeing him as a leader here, and I saw that here, and I quite liked it. And there's some interesting variant covers as well. Cover B, or it's either cover B or C, is a cover of Venadia herself, which is pretty good. And then there's another alternate cover as well, which is just all the poses of the league, but of the Titans. Sorry, but overall, I didn't find it was too bad.
All right, up next we have Batman, Superman, World's Finest, number 27. Mark Waid's the writer, Dan Mora and Travis Mercer on art, Tamara Bonvillain on color, Steve Wands on letters. This continues to be a heck of a lot of fun. You kind of wonder, we talked about absolute power and kind of building up to that. And, it's so much more than that, right? Because it's House of Brainiac that then leads into absolute power. We know Mark Waid's running absolute power. We know that's part of the reason that he had to give up the writing duties on Shazam. I'm glad he's still doing World's Finest. I wonder how far he worked ahead on World's Finest so that he could show run the Absolute Power event and write all those Absolute Power tie-ins. But I sort of feel like he's having too much fun to give up on this title. Not that he wouldn't if he needed to. I trust that he knows what his own workload is and is going to deliver a good story with Absolute Power. But it feels like he's having so much fun on World's Finest that he doesn't want to give it up, right? Because as Rocky and I have said throughout, this is just such a timeless story, such a timeless series, right? Every time he tells a story, it feels like it could fit in just about any point in the DCU. And that's how this feels. And I'm saying all that even with the caveat that this story that he's currently telling is all about these fifth dimensional imps, right? Like Mxyzptlk and Batmite and all these other sort of heroic versions of imps that are kind of based on DC heroes. Now Waid's come up with this idea of fifth dimensional imps that are based on the villains. So why can't there be dimensional imps that are based on the villains? So that's what we're having going on right now in this story. And it's as wild and crazy as you would expect any story with Mxyzptlk and Batmite and all those people to be in it, right? Like, it gets meta, it gets sort of silly and goofy, it gets a little Looney Tunes at times, it gets a little Super Friends at times when Batman and Superman are stuck in the second dimension, and the way that they're drawn by the artist looks like what Batman and Superman look like in those classic late 70s, early 80s cartoons. So it's a heck of a lot of fun. Is it my favorite? Does this make me love fifth dimensional imps and that whole stuff? No, I still don't love it because it becomes a little of a situation where you can do whatever you want. So there's kind of no consequences to the story. Um, um, there's no rules basically. So it can become a little ex deus machina, which is what I never really liked about Mixius Pitalik. Um, and it's funny because when I was a little kid, I loved his stories, but they do tend to fire the imagination when you're little. This imp that has magical powers that can do whatever, and how is Superman going to trick him into saying his name backwards this time, right? Um, but I don't know. As I've gotten older, I guess I just prefer my stories to be a little less filled with insanity. It's the same reason the Harley Quinn's never really done it for me. But all that to say that this is still a very fun story. It's well paced. The art is fantastic. And it was great to see Waid once again pulling from his encyclopedic knowledge of DC history and giving us the super team of Jimmy Olsen's, right? Like, how are you going to defeat all these imps? Well, Mixie decides, well, Jimmy Olsen's had 75,000 different versions of being a hero. Let's get the Olsen squad here. So we've got him with 6 arms. We've got him as a werewolf. We've got him as Turtle Boy. We've got him as Flame Bird. Unfortunately, it appears like it's going to backfire at the end because sort of the big bad, who we haven't really been introduced to yet, but appears as sort of like a fifth dimensional Joker. But we learn he's actually from the 6th dimension is what we're told here. Once Jimmy uses his abilities and defeats all these other imps, this guy shows up and says, the contest is complete. The outcome has been determined. James Bartholomew Olsen is the Earth's mightiest hero. So it doesn't sound like it bodes well for either Jimmy Olsen or Earth. If Jimmy has to be the champion of Earth and defeat some even more formidable foe, Earth could be in for a rough ride here. So we'll see how it all plays out. But there's no doubt that Waid is having fun, and that comes through in the writing. This is definitely a very fun story. So what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Mark Waid, he just nails the whole Silver Age sensibility thing with DC, and just he definitely captures what made DC popular in the, frankly, the 60s and the 70s. I mean, the reality here is that when Marvel took off in the mid-1960s, they surpassed DC and always beat them in sales, but DC always had a super loyal following, and it still does. I'm one of those loyal followers. But Marvel was always the realistic, the people next door sort of real life sort of iteration of various characters. DC was always the fantasy, the myth, and the zany Silver Age of it all. And this Way just captures that, but he nails it. I find it funny that I don't know how many of these iterations of Jimmy Olsen have actually existed in the current continuity, but that's really not the point, because those of us who know Jimmy Olsen, even if, regardless of what, continuity aside, everyone knows that Jimmy Olsen has been Turtle Boy. He's been all kinds of crazy things through the years, and the irony here is that Mixias Pitalik doesn't want to give further powers to Robin because Robin couldn't even figure out how to use supervision or telescopic vision last issue. And yet, so he chooses Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy Olsen doesn't seem to have any problems utilizing all these other mega powers that he's had because he's been these other things before. And so the irony is that, I mean, who would have thought that Jimmy Olsen, of all people, would have been the secret weapon used to defeat or hold their own against sixth-dimensional beings? Yet he is. And I think therein lies maybe the secret to part of how to defeat the sixth-dimensional imp that is sort of the iteration of the sixth-dimensional Joker. It's worth noting that the Superman and Batman in this issue talk about 2 dimensions, 3 dimension, 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensions. Of course, they're trapped in a 2-dimensional space because they're literally in 2 dimensions. They're like painted on a wall. And in order to defeat them, Batmite is trying to help figure out how to, how to get them out of the 2nd dimension, and then they end up in the 6th. And then with the 6th dimension, you have access to everything. Well, if you have access to everything in the 6th dimension, why does this villain from the 6th dimension, why did he come to our dimension the third dimension to take it over. What was he hoping for? Well, he's not special in the sixth dimension, and everybody in the sixth dimension has access apparently to everything. But in the third dimension, how do you defeat somebody who, how do you defeat somebody like that when they have the sixth dimensional powers? Superman is clued out, but Batman seems to have a clue. Batman seems to know. Superman says, in the lower dimensions, this imp killer can prove his superiority by magically defeating anything he perceives as a threat. That's great background, but none of this suggests any way to beat him. And Batman says, doesn't it? But Mark Waid has done this before. He's done this before where Batman in one issue has hinted that he knows how to defeat the villain, but you don't find out what Batman knows until the next issue. And that's exactly what Mark Waid done here to great effect. Because now I'm curious as hell. I'm racking my brains because I like to think I'm as imaginative as Mark Waid. Of course, I'm not, but I like to delude myself to think that I am. And I'm thinking, okay, if Batman can figure out how to defeat this, I ought to be able to use my crazy Silver Age sensibilities and figure it out. I haven't figured it out yet, so I'm curious to know how Batman is going to defeat this sixth-dimensional imp. But yeah, great story, and of course, fantastic art once again by Dan Mora. Oh, sorry, your mute's on.
Yeah, I think it's isn't it Travis Mercer that's doing the art?
Oh, Travis Mercer. Well, good. He does a good job fooling me. It was good.
Yeah, Dan Mora and Travis Mercer both. So
okay.
I think they're dividing the art duties. So all right. Up next we have Catwoman number 65, 9 Lives Part 7. Tini Howard on story. Ivan Shavrin on art and colors, Louis Gattoni on letters. I'm not sure, like part 7, is this going to end up being a 12 issue? Is it going to be a 9 issue, which would make sense, 9 lives? I'm not sure, but what I'll say first of all about the art, typically in this vein of like Stephen Byrne or Otto Schmidt, where they're handling the line work and the colors, I generally tend to like it. But I'm just wondering if this is the best aesthetic for the story that's being told. Like when I just look at the art and I'm not reading the story, I like the art. I think the art is interesting. Maybe it's a little, I don't want to say juvenile, but it's got some exaggeration of expression for emotion and kind of the proportions for the bodies and what have you, anatomy, and it really works. It works as this interesting sort of over-the-top cartoony style. But then when I read the story is not necessarily working for me with the art. All along, I think the story that's being told is a very serious story and, more along the lines of like a DC house style, I think might be better. Like, not to compare anybody to like classic Catwoman artists, but, I think back to, the artist that I first knew on Catwoman that kind of came to mind was Jim Ballant, right? Like that was just who drew Catwoman the best. But even things like when the Catwoman series first launched after New 52, we had Guillaume March. I think he'd be an excellent person to be drawing this whole thing. And it just, again, it goes to show, I know the way that art and artists work now, we don't get, long runs. We don't get everybody drawing every issue of a series or what have you, but it would be nice if if editorial could think ahead a little bit. And I know this also goes to having to pay people. It's just like, okay, if you knew this 9 issue was coming up 4 or 5 issues ago, you could have given them a head start, whoever it was, so that the same artist would draw this entire arc. So that again, I know it's not necessarily realistic. It's not what happens these days, but I think the stories suffer when they switch art styles from issue to issue, especially when it's so different, such a different art style. Like I think of how this is going to read in the trade, and it looks completely different. So again, it's not that I dislike this art. I just don't think this art suits the story that's being told. As far as the story itself, well, we're getting exactly what we expected, right? After Catwoman appeared to die at the end of last issue and use up her last life, sure enough, the goddess that gave her all those lives shows up to resurrect her one last time. And I do like what she says. She's not. It's not that they're counting lives. It's a whole thing. Cats have 9 lives or whatever. But she's saying, it's not a tally sheet, right? We elder gods, or old gods, we waited for mortals who showed promise, and then we bestowed on them our blessing for when they needed us. But that being said, you shouldn't squander the gifts that we gave you, so you wonder, does this sort of cat god or what have you approve of what Selena was doing? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe she doesn't approve of everything that Selena has done, all the choices, but she still believes in Selena, right? And really the story that is now unfolding here, it's all the choices that Selena made early on, to go up against, various villains, that's now coming back to sort of bite her in the butt, if you will, right? Everybody that she robbed, everybody that she wronged, everybody that she brought to justice or what have you. Now it's all coming full circle. And it doesn't seem like she has any, as much as this cat god, gave her another life, brought her back one more time. It doesn't appear she's going to have any other chances beyond this. So in terms of the story itself, I think the big idea is cool. I think the execution is not as good as it could be, which I guess that might be a good way to sum up the entire run of Catwoman under Tini Howard's writing. Really great ideas. Sometimes the execution is not the best, and the art's been uneven. I think back to Ram V's run, right? Like, we don't even have to go back to Jim Ballant or the beginning of New 52, whatever. Just think back to Ram V's run when it was Fernando Blanco, and it was that whole Michael Mann kind of slick urban cityscape type art. It worked really, really well. You could even go back to the beginning of Howard's run, right? And who was it? Nico Gandini, I think it was. Not Nico Gandini, Nico Leone. I'm getting Nico Leone and Veronica Gandini confused. But yeah, Nico Leone, like that had a lot of neon colors, and it was a really slick style. It really, really worked. So again, I just think, get a consistent artist. If the writing is not always consistent, if it's a bit up and down in execution, again, not in plot, but just in pacing and execution, if the writing is not always consistent, if you give us consistent art, it helps to smooth out those rough edges. But when we're not getting consistent art and we're not getting consistent writing, yeah, the book, it's just really up and down. It can really suffer, I think. So anyway, what are your thoughts on it, Rocky?
I'm not really a fan. The art is fine, but you and I have both searched for the proper adjective to describe our general feeling. You said the word juvenile. I've sort of copied that word from you in past when I talk about art that I think is for a younger audience. That's what I mean. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when I think of an artist, I think this is art is juvenile too, meaning not to insult it, but it feels like it's drawn for a younger audience. That's what it looks like to me, and that's why I don't like it. It just gives the illusion that this isn't for this is not the appropriate art for this type of story. And now, having said that, the story itself, I love the concept. I've never really liked the execution of this. I didn't. Tini Howard hasn't displayed a particularly great knowledge of Selena Kyle's past. If she had, then more of her past should have been properly incorporated, because if she is going to use her 9 lives to right some wrongs, to introduce completely different characters that we've never seen before in Catwoman's past stories, just seems to be kind of a waste of time to me, and does a disservice to the potential for the story itself. Having said that, okay, so now she's all these people that she's ripped off, or she's all these things that she's done, all these villains who she's pissed off. Very conveniently, where she's lost 5 or 6 lives, and she's pissed off these other thieves by ripping them off. Now she decides that she's taken it upon herself, after she gets scolded by her cat god, who doesn't seem to care. And this is going to be a harsh criticism, but but just the way I feel. There's no consequence to Selina for squandering the gift of her mentality. This cat god actually gives her another chance and actually believes that Selina Kyle, of all people, has learned her lesson. Selina's learned nothing. She's learned nothing, and there's no reason why this Bastis, this cat god, should reward her by continuing. Well, this cat god rewarded her by giving her another life. Now I'm hoping this is the last one and this will end, because Selina Kyle doesn't deserve to have any more lives, and I hope this cat god knows that. She says, the cat god says to her, we have eons of patience for those who have earned our blessings, and it is our job to decide when they are needed most. Okay, well, it doesn't really describe why you chose Selina Kyle, a known thief, in the first place, but I'll let that go. There's one other thing, one subtle thing that I don't want to. You and I got into a heated debate on Gotham War, if you recall, and I particularly, I thought Selina Kyle, I always sort of scoffed at the idea that Selina Kyle in Gotham War, Selina Kyle's central conceit in Gotham War was that she was going to train all these bad guys, train all these criminals to be thieves, and to have them only rob the rich and train them to be thieves so they could be good, proper thieves, whatever the hell that means. And here we have the arrogance of Selina Kyle on full display. She ends up, finding Vandal Savage, forgiving Vandal Savage, of course, Scandal and Savage forgiving her. And then she decides that, that this Veronica Viceroy, the Sea Wasp, I guess the stuff that Veronica Viceroy, who is also a thief, she's stealing ancient artifacts, but what she's stealing is bad. So she's a bad thief. So Selina Kyle takes it upon herself that, I guess it's okay if Selina Kyle trains all kinds of other people, hundreds of people, to be thieves in Gotham City, but she has to stop this one thief, the Sea Wasp, because just because I guess she doesn't like her. And, admittedly, Sea Wasp wants to have her killed too and dead. I get it, but I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy there. The justification Selina Kyle uses in the story is that while Sea Wasp is collecting all these ancient artifacts to create a secret weapon, how would Selina Kyle even know that? Is she some expert in ancient antiquities and powers and ancient powers and everything? I suppose she is. I guess she's the Batman of the thief world. But I thought it was interesting, some of the overlaps here and some of the inherent hypocrisies, which quite frankly I expect from Selina Kyle. She is a thief. You're going to do that which is in your own self-interest. You're going to have cognitive dissonance. I get that. I just like to sort of poke fun at Selina every now and then. And so overall, I actually thought that the story itself gave me enough that I found it fun. I found it sort of, I found it interesting. I don't know. It's not one of my first reads when I get it. The art doesn't really fit. But there is something about this story. There's something where this might be going that interests me. And I do want to give Tini Howard credit for, Scandal Savage. Thank you, Tini Howard, for giving us Scandal Savage with 2 wives. Not only knockout, but a third. She's got 2 wives. I did not know. We got a scene with Scandal Savage with 2 wives. That's awesome. That's really cool. As a Purian fanboy, I want to thank Tini Howard for that, because I got a chuckle out of that. I mean, imagine Scandal Savage, a decent looking redhead's got 2 gorgeous redheads in bed with her when Selina Kyle shows up. I mean, hey, this is one of the reasons why I would have preferred maybe a better artist that could maybe script that scene, because that's a scene you don't want to see drawn in a juvenile manner. And so this is what I mean. When you have these provocative, sexually charged characters, do not make them put juvenile artists on them, meaning drawn for a younger audience. There's just a disconnect there that doesn't work. These characters are fanboy characters, adult characters, and they need to be drawn by adult artists with traditional American comic book art. That's my bias, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, up next we have Nightwing number 114 from writer Tom Taylor, Bruno Redondo on art, Adriana Lucas on colors, Wes Abbott on letters. We're finally getting the long promoted Fallen Grayson storyline. This is part 1 of it. We've got Dick looks to be climbing a mountain somewhere, trying to get over his recent fear of heights. He's flashing back to the first time he fell when he was climbing up to the trapeze, when he snuck over to the big top when his parents were asleep. Um, and so we have him climbing the mountain, and then we flash back to 2 weeks ago. We see Heartless. We see him taking over the gangs that Blockbuster left behind, or the henchmen that Blockbuster left behind, apparently. So how this is all going to play out remains to be seen, but it seems like we're finally going to get the Heartless story that's been teased, God, for 30 issues now. I think Heartless was pretty much right at the start of Tom Taylor's run. He has shown up throughout now and again. He was the subject of the annual last year. It was basically his origin. He does have, I don't want to say ties, but he was there in the big top the night that Dick Grayson's parents were killed. So there is some sort of callback to the earliest time of Dick Grayson. And in fact, he was a schoolmate of Dick Grayson, was a bit of a bully that Grayson stood up to after Grayson was adopted by Bruce Wayne. So it feels like we're finally moving forward on that story. Interesting that the first couple of pages, as I said, are Grayson with Hallie, or Bitewing, his dog, climbing these snow-capped mountains. What does that have to do with the rest of the story? We have no idea. So I'm interested. I want to know what Grayson's up to on these mountaintops or wherever he's climbing. That seems to be interesting. I'm glad we're finally going to get a resolution to the Heartless storyline. At least it seems like we're going to. I'm sure it's not like he's going to be defeated once and for all. We'll never see him again, because that's just not the way comics work, right? Hopefully he'll be defeated, probably go to jail, or maybe he'll escape mysteriously and we won't hear from him for a period of time. But I am interested in seeing Nightwing go up against him, not least of which is because Heartless in a lot of ways is sort of the opposite side of the coin of Dick Grayson, right? Like, so much of what Grayson does is based on his empathy and how much he cares for people. And Heartless is not just heartless in name, and this villain who steals people's hearts. He really has no empathy. He really only cares about power, and doesn't care who gets hurt along the way, which is sort of the exact opposite of who Dick Grayson is. So again, I think he's an interesting character that Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo have created here as sort of this foil for Dick Grayson. So I'm curious to see how that all plays out. Speaking of Bruno Redondo, the art here in this issue is absolutely fantastic. Adriano Lucas on the colors does a fantastic job. There's so many artistic choices that are just great, whether it's the facial expressions when they're at this sort of charity event where Heartless is there and his civilian guys, and Dick Grayson is there trying to get people to donate to the Alfred Pennyworth Foundation, or even things like when we see Nightwing in costume and silhouette earlier in the issue, where he's practically all in shadow. We just get a few blue highlights, like his mask and his shoulders. And the building behind him is kind of lit up, and you can understand why he's backlit. Like, just really smart artistic choices. I won't say I'm the first one, but I do call it out at times when it seems like artists don't have enough time, and we get a lot of silhouette pieces, or we get very little background, like super light backgrounds, and it's like, well, they had so little time that we just ended up with silhouettes, and then we had no backgrounds or what have you. That's not the case with Redondo. I mean, you look at this page, if you're watching us on YouTube, you look at this page here. Yes, Nightwing is in silhouette. Yes, there's not a lot of detail to him, but look behind him. Look what's on the ground in the alley. Like, every window is drawn, all this detritus and garbage in the alley. Like, there's plenty of detail in this page. It's an artistic choice. It's not a choice that Redondo made because he's like, crap, I'm out of time. I don't have time to draw in all the detail on Dick Grayson. No, that's not the case at all. And it shows in his artwork. So just love Redondo's art. I'm still a fan. Again, Tom Taylor, we've talked about it. At times, Nightwing, it feels like it's moving along at a good clip, a pace that I'm happy with. Other times it feels like it drags a little bit. I've never felt with Nightwing like it's moving too fast. I've never read a Tom Taylor book where it felt like it was paced too quickly. But to me, this one's paced perfectly. There's plenty of action here. There's plenty of teases for what's to come. I just hope that, unlike his Titans book, which seems to be bogged down a little bit in absolute power tie-ins, that Nightwing doesn't suffer from that, right? Because it finally feels like we're moving on this Heartless character, and I really would hate to see that slowed down because he's got to dedicate some page space to absolute power. So I guess we'll see. What were your thoughts on this issue, Rocky?
I thought this was really well done, and I'm gonna make a prediction that I hope comes true, and that is that if there was one, this is part one of six, or pardon me, part one of five of a story arc called Fallen Grayson. I like the idea that this is we're gonna take some time for Dick Grayson to fall from grace. Because I expect that in the part 5 of this, he's going to be hitting rock bottom, and then we're going to get the rise. And that's cool. I think that his fall here is going to be gradual, and I hope that it is believable. And in this issue, we see hints. We already see what Heartless is doing. Heartless is clearly. He has waited for Dick Grayson to be on top of the mountain. He wants Dick Grayson to be on top of the mountain, so to speak, not just a metaphor, before he pushes him off. And the metaphor here of that mountain, it's right at the beginning of the story with the cover itself shows Dick Grayson, walking to a big mountaintop. He's lost the ability to take a leap. Well, at the same time, he's on top of the world as Dick Grayson. He's head of the Alfred Pennyworth Foundation. And even all the people of Bloodhaven is a safer city. It's surpassed Gotham. It used to have a worse crime rate than Gotham. Now it's surpassed Gotham. Bruce Wayne has even recognized that. They're having a special night for Dick Grayson. And so, and this is just when Heartless, along with his trusty sidekick, Gerald, his butler, has decided to, drop the first attack on Dick Grayson, and that is to reveal that the last will and testament of Blockbuster left all of his riches, all of his, I guess, money, which he got, of course, from all his criminal conduct. He left it all to the Alfred Pennyworth Foundation. So right off the bat, there's an attack against the image of Dick Grayson, and Heartless really knows where to. He really is Heartless, and he not only. You want to know how bad this guy is? He can do a subtle attack by creating a PR campaign against Dick Grayson by having, by revealing that Blockbuster left his last will and testament, left everything at the Alfred Pennyworth Foundation. But then the children of all of the underlings that used to work for Blockbuster are kidnapped, and he's using those children to essentially tattoo all of his underlings with the Heartless symbol on their chest. And if they don't, and if they don't do what is bidding, he kills this child's father right in front of her. This guy really is Heartless. He's living up to the name. And I thought this was a very effective issue. For me, I thought, finally, this is good. I've been very critical of Tom Taylor about how slow-paced Nightwing is being. But when I feel that when it's slow and methodical, but I can feel the crescendo building, I don't mind it. And this is how this feels. This issue feels that way for me. We've taken a while to get here. We've had a lot of organic development getting here. But now that we're here, I really, really like this issue because I can imagine, oh boy, maybe it's going to be a blessing in disguise. All the bitching that so many of us have done about, what about Heartless? When is he going to go after Heartless? Well, now we're going to get our wish. And I think maybe for many of us, we're going to be so happy that we had this build up. I'm hoping, and we'll see it play out over these next 4 or 5 issues. And then, of course, beyond that, when inevitably Dick Grayson gets his ability to leap back.
Yeah, going back to the first arc, right? Leaping into the light. Now he can't leap. Really, so... okay, up next we've got Green Lantern War Journal number 9, Myth and Legend, from writer Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Art is by Montos, colors by Adriana Lucas, letters by Dave Sharp. Give us your thoughts on this one.
My favorite part of the issue, my favorite part of this entire of PKJ's run here has been just the fact that John Stewart created this LE construct and how this LE construct, this AI character, which is really essentially it is an AI character, and it's kind of weird because we got all this talk in our real world about AI and the the prevalence of AI and is it a good thing or a bad thing. I just read and I've been reading a series of articles how AI is changing my profession as a family lawyer, and I have to spend more money on tech and in order to get with the program, and so it's something that we all have to adjust to. And here we have this character that is literally AI character, this Ellie character, along with some other powers infused with the ring, protecting Jon Stewart's mother, and how she seems to have moments of lucidity where she kind of knows that she's being protected by the Revenant Queen and her dark forces, and I really like those moments here. There are meanwhile we have Lantern. I always forget his name. Lantern Shepherd. He's on Earth and he's reading the Book of Noah because Guy Gardner showed him where the Book of Noah is. Apparently, again, he kept it in his closet because they want to try to find some way to defeat the Radiant Dead. And then in this story we get the origins of the Dark Stars, and that's related to and the origin of the Dark Stars is related to the Dark Star of the Fen, and the Dark Star of the Fen exists right now in this other darker dimension where Jon Stewart currently is trying to protect these people and trying to escape this other realm in order to get out and I guess battle the Revenant Queen. And there's a lot going on here. I do have, I feel that maybe the criticism is that maybe there's so many moving parts here, but at the same time, I feel that the story, I have to go back. I should go back and reread it, the past issues, because I always feel like I got to play catch up, and every issue that comes out, there seems to be something here where I got to play catch up, and I don't really the storyline that maybe one of the reasons why I love the Ellie storyline so much is because it's the easiest to remember. It's the most emotionally driven, so it's more easy for me to remember. Whereas the other stuff, the details of the plot involving the Revenant Queen are a little bit more kind of wonky in my head, but it's still really good, and the art by Montos is just fantastic. It's really good, and it really just drives home. It feels like a character-driven drama, and I can't believe that this Ellie character that's just really just a construct is actually kind of a kick-ass. I want her to be real. I feel like I'm reading a story about Pinocchio, but I really want him. I want him to be a real boy. I'm like the Geppetto of comic readers now. But I just I enjoy this, and I don't find myself particularly interested in Jon Stewart getting out of the Fen. I find myself less interested in this because it seems like PKJ is still building on this long history of the god of Olgrim, and now he's incorporating the Death Stars, and it's all this stuff going back into the Superman run and the Green Lantern run, which at the same time, shame on me for criticizing him because I want writers to do what PKJ is doing. Think big, tell a big story, and go big or go home, and that's what he's doing. And so to do this series justice, I'm gonna have to go back and reread it again because I think I will even be more rewarded for it. But I do enjoy this, and the art's fantastic. I'm not entirely sure exactly how this is going to resolve itself, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with Ellie and his mother. But I have a feeling that there's going to be some. If his mother dies at the end of this, I predict I'm going to be shedding some tears because I have a feeling that's where it's headed. And what's going to happen with Ellie? I got so many questions, and I'm really curious to see how this whole storyline resolves, but I do recommend this for people, while at the same time telling people right up front, it's a committed read, and it might take something to really, you might have to reread some of the issues more than once, but I think the rewards are there. What do you think?
Yeah, you don't just have to read this more than once. You likely have to read the War World saga more than once, and maybe even some past DC history about the Maltusians and the Dark Stars and what have you, because like you said, PKJ is building on all of that, and it's what he does best. This kind of world building and what have you, and making sense. But it is complicated storytelling. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. The story with Ellie and John's mother is the much easier part to digest. It's kind of the emotional anchor, if you will, the emotional gravitas of the story. Well, the action and the really cool lore part of it does exist in kind of the John Stewart plot line. Dark uh, Dark Star of the Fen, building on the Dark Stars as a peacekeeping force, of which John Stewart was a Dark Star at one point. So was Donna Troy, um, and also building on the Green Lantern mythos as well. So yeah, you're rewarded if you know a lot of that history. If you don't, then you may not get as much out of the story as others might. But there might be a situation where read it all in trade. You almost would say you have to put this in a giant omnibus with the War World, because it interesting. He comes off of telling a Superman story to telling a John Stewart Green Lantern story, but still using Olgren and still making it make sense. I mean, that's inspired storytelling. The art by Montos is fantastic. The color work is great as well. I'm really curious to see where this is going. And as we've said before, this is John Stewart storytelling done right. You're still elevating John Stewart. You're still making him unique as a Green Lantern. You're still giving him powers and abilities that other Green Lanterns don't, but you're not making him this, for lack of a better term, a Mary Sue. I guess a male Mary Sue, where he can
A
just
Gary Sue.
yeah, Gary Sue, where he can just do whatever he wants whenever he wants to or whenever he needs to get himself out of trouble. That's not the case. So again, fantastic job by Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Really enjoying where this is going. All right, up next, speaking of Green Lanterns, we have the final issue of Alan Scott Green Lantern, issue number 6 from writer Tim Sheridan. Cian Torme is the artist. We've got inks by Jordi Tarragona for pages 7 through 10. I don't know why. We just need inks for those pages, but be that as it may. Matt Herms on colors, Lucas Catoni on letters. I thought this was a great ending to the story. This has been a fantastic limited series, showing the potential of Alan Scott. I know there are people out there that don't like that Alan Scott has become this homosexual character. They might look back to, Golden Age stories and say, hey, it was never hinted at there, or what have you. They're Golden Age stories. There's no sexuality hinted at one way or the other, right? The fact that Tim Sheridan has explored that in the early issues, explored the way it was anybody with attraction to the same sex was treated as a deviant, put in mental institutions, persecuted, tortured, electroshock, all that stuff, things that we would sort of not like to think about or like to pretend didn't happen. Like he's starting that conversation. He's showing that in the context of a character who existed all the way back then, making it part of his story, making it part of his origin, making it part of why he is the character he is, and doing a fantastic job. And no more well done than in this issue, where he finally defeats Vlad, at least temporarily. He defeats the Red Lantern, at least temporarily. And once he does, J. Edgar Hoover, who had his own proclivities, as we now know, is still blackmailing him in a way. Hey, you're going to do what I say. You're going to say the things I want you to say. The JSA is going to be under my thumb. And Alan Scott standing up to that, saying, go ahead, out me if you want to, but you're going to be turning that lens on yourself as well. And the fact that J. Edgar Hoover had all these secrets, in real life only adds to the story and adds to what Tim Sheridan is doing. But where the story for me really comes home and shines, more than the action, more than the interesting relationship that Tim Sheridan built between Alan Scott Green Lantern and Vlad the Red Lantern, Johnny Ladd as he was known when he was a spy in the army, and had his romantic relationship with Alan Scott. Again, that relationship is just fantastic, and I hope it's explored more by either Tim or other writers. But where it really comes home is the emotionality of it, talking about these conversations that are sometimes tough to have and tough to think about the way people are treated back then. Um, but we get to the end of this story, and there's Alan Scott with his son Todd, who's Obsidian from Infinity Inc. days. Um, and this is a story that Alan was relating to his son because at one time Alan Scott was married, does have children, um, and he's relating this to his son and how much he cares about his family, how much he cares about Todd, how much he cares about his daughter Jenny, um, and how self-aware he is. And I just think it's great writing. It's the way to be additive to a character. Again, go back to the golden age Green Lantern, Alan Scott stories being told in 40s and 50s here. These aren't complicated stories. These aren't stories that were told with the idea of great characterization and emotion and gravitas and uh, a way to elevate Alan Scott as a character. No, they were told as throwaway entertainment for 8 to 12-year-old boys. That was just the way it was back then. But the fact that you can take a character from then that was built as sort of a almost interchangeable straight white blonde male superhero, and over the decades have built on that to the point we're at now with Alan Scott, who's a complicated and interesting character who has children, who loves children, but is also homosexual and has all this rich history that's built upon by many writers over the years. That's really cool. That's really interesting, right? Like take this Alan Scott that we have here in this comic and compare it to Alan Scott in, say, his 10th appearance. Read both those stories and tell me which one you find more interesting. It's going to be a no-brainer, right? There's going to be much more sophisticated and interesting storytelling and dialogue and everything, and again, it's not a fair comparison. It was different times back then. Comics were written for a different audience, as I said. But there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of great work being done, in this case by Tim Sheridan in this series, because we have loved it throughout. And this is a retcon done correctly. It doesn't invalidate anything that's come before for Alan Scott. It's only additive, and additive in a way that's interesting. Again, because this is the earliest days. He can't even make constructs. He can't even make energy constructs at the beginning of the story. So really interesting. Red Lantern is an interesting character. I hope we see more of him. And I thought the art by Cian Torme throughout was fantastic, as was the color work. Color work, we're just talking about Adriana Lucas's colors on Green Lantern War Journal. Matt Herms has done a fantastic job on Alan Scott Green Lantern, because when you're doing Lantern stories, whether it's modern Lanterns like John Stewart or the Golden Age Lantern Alan Scott, when it's Lanterns and you got color spectrum and what have you, the colors are very, very important, whether it's green or red or purple or whatever. Color is just a really important inherent part of the story. And Matt Herms does a fantastic job here. So I'm thrilled with the way this turned out. And I don't know if we've mentioned having Tim on, but the last time I talked to Tim, we agreed it would be best to wait till the series was all said and done to have him come on. So I'm sure sometime in the next, month or so, we'll probably have him on to talk about this. I can't wait. So what were your thoughts on the conclusion of this?
I want to make the first comment I want to make is something that Tim Sheridan done. He scripted that was I think was probably a very wise thing for him to do, and it was also brilliant and yet very simplistic in its design. And that is, at the end of this story, Alan Scott explains that after that early adventure where he defeats the Red Lantern. And Vlad, his former lover, is put into jail, and of course Johnny Ladd escapes from jail because he still has access to the Crimson Flame. It's very important that Alan Scott explains, and some readers are going to miss the point of this, and they're going to miss this, and it's a very important point, because a lot of them will say, "Well, wait a minute, Alan Scott went on to have wives. He married Rose and Thorn, and they had 2 children. Well, why did that happen? Well, Alan Scott says something, and it makes so much sense. He says, I thought I was for a long time, and before that, I convinced myself that my interest in men like Vladimir Sokov was just a trick of the light, a way for my human mind to make sense of the cosmic bond between my emerald flame and the crimson one that he embodied. In other words, he still questioned his sexuality even after this series, even after that, because in the past, after that first adventure, Alan Scott continued to question his sexuality and still had some doubts because he thought, well, maybe this is just because of this bond I have with Vladimir, and it's cosmically created. Maybe it's not actually a genuine human feeling I have, but it was, and because of that added to his conflicted feelings and emotions, and it made sense that he still would explore relationships with other women, but still discovered that he was in fact gay, because his son even asked him, well, maybe you're fluid, and maybe, and of course he just said that he wasn't. And I just want to give a quick reference to Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. In Harley Quinn's first comic book series, and this is something that was very subtle. It was written by a story written by Andy. It was Lieberman, and he hinted that part of the affection that Harley had toward Poison Ivy may have been a result. And this is, sorry, my Siri is talking to me. Okay, my computer is talking to me, but the story hinted that it was because of all the pheromones that Poison Ivy had that she was causing Harley to show affection toward her, and it wasn't genuine. It wasn't a genuine lesbian love relationship. And in any event, I thought that was interesting what he did there. I love the fact that Vlad embraced the fact that he's a villain. I love the fact that he wiped out and he uses lethal force. He's different than Alan Scott. He's not afraid to use lethal force. He did it. He had to take out the other people because he was the chosen one. Alan Scott's chosen. He was chosen. And these would be, I can't even remember the name of the group, the Russian group that they fought. I can't remember their name. Do you remember their name?
Crimson Force?
The Crimson Force or whatever it was. Anyways, They didn't last long, which is unfortunate because I kind of liked them. I kind of wish they weren't killed, but it was believable to me. And I thought the Spectre was a little bit depowered. Sorry?
Crimson Host. That's what
Crimson Host. Okay, yeah, but no, I thought this was well done, and it made sense that Red Lantern escaped at the end. It left things sort of open ended. There's a lot of history to fill in here, and for all those who love your traditional Alan Scott, all those stories are still intact, and you could still write a story of Alan Scott in the 1960s dating a woman. For those that have a hard time getting over the the sexuality issue. So anyways, I thought it was well done, but you're not going to please everybody no matter what. But frankly, I thought this was excellent, absolutely excellent. It was absolutely additive. And for those who think otherwise, you're being overly nitpicky in regard to if you read this was infinitely more interesting than the Golden Age origin on multiple levels. And if you don't believe me, just go back and read the story. Go read the Golden Age story, but you won't because it's not as good as this.
Yeah, exactly. And they weren't meant to be. So, all right. Up next, we have Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong #7 from writer Brian Buccellato. Christian Duce and Tom Derenick are on the art duties. Louis Guerra on colors. Richard Starking and Comic Craft's Tyler Smith on letters. Hope you guys all got a chance to listen to my chat that I had last Friday with Brian about the end of this series. Other than to say the series is fun, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's been fun throughout. There's awesome moments as there have been throughout the series. Brian and I talked about it. Callbacks to things like Bane breaking Batman's back. This time it's Batman breaking the back of Mechagodzilla as piloted by Lex Luthor. And those callbacks, those moments have been peppered throughout, right? You could talk about Death of Superman as well. But in addition to those awesome callbacks to kind of very iconic moments in DC history, we have another great moment in this issue when King Kong himself gets a Green Lantern ring. We saw Guy Gardner get killed at the end of, or toward the end of last issue. His ring goes out searching for somebody who's worthy. Lo and behold, who is it? It's Kong. I mean, that's just amazing. That's awesome. He creates a tomahawk and cuts off one of the heads or tentacles or what have you on Tiamat. It's just absolutely fantastic, as has been throughout. Tons of action, tons of fun, grounded with an emotional ending with Lois and Clark, which has been kind of the way the series started and the way the series ended. Brian and I talked about that as well. So highly encourage everybody, go listen to that chat I had with Brian. It's quick. It's like 15 minutes or what have you. And I can't wait. I can't wait to read this again in trade. And I really hope, as Brian said, that he gets a chance to do more because there's more to be told here. There's more to be explored. Although it was great to have this large cast, I do wonder if next time, I should have asked him this, if he wouldn't use a smaller cast so we could explore even more in depth on some of the monsters and some of the heroes and what have you. Because, yeah, he did pick a rather large cast, and he did a fantastic job of making it work. But I think to get a little more out of this, a little more characterization, what have you, a smaller cast would probably work. But I'm not complaining at all because this was absolutely fantastic. And it was a huge hit. It was a huge hit. I saw people talking about this, people loving it. There's comments on my interview with him, how much people like it. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic ending. He brought it home, stuck the landing for sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that could make this have probably sell more, and I say this with great respect. I love the art. Christian Duce's art is fantastic. Tom Derenick's art was great. But there's an artist by the name of Daniel Warren Johnson who I can imagine if he would have drawn this, because he's just high. He just happens to be his moment in the sun right now with Transformers and everything. A couple of issues with him might have put it really even sales even higher. But no, I love the art. I love the story. The one thing that Brian Booch, I can call him Booch, his characterizations are spot on. He actually emotionally grounded this series, again, with the proposal between Clark Kent and Lois Lane, and it works so well. And the central conceit and the joke at the end is that throughout this entire series, for all 7 issues, the magic stone, the red stone that Toyman took and that ultimately dragged Godzilla and all the Titans into our world, was literally caught in Godzilla's foot, literally from issue 1 till now, at the end of issue 1 until now. And that's sort of, it's just funny. Even Flash made the comment that this is the weirdest adventure I've ever had. And Batman just says, yeah. I mean, it just works. And it's got great art. It's character driven. Everybody's got a moment to shine. And may I just say how happy I am that, thank you, Brian Booch, because you obviously think as high as Guy Gardner as I do. If you have got to kill off a Green Lantern for King Kong to get a ring, thank you for killing off Guy Gardner. Because I don't like that character. I'm glad he's dead in this universe. It was great to see that he has the same fate as most of the villains that the monsters that Godzilla goes up against. My apologies to Guy Gardner fans, but I thought that was just great. Now you realize that if Tom King had written this series, he'd have got a lot of flack for killing off Guy Gardner, but Brian Booch won't, because he's not Tom King. But that's a digression. I enjoyed this. Great. Literally, there's entire pages here where there's no dialogue, just a bunch of onomatopoeia. Did I say that right? Onomatopoeia with King Kong and Godzilla screaming their lungs out while fighting other monsters. This was a lot of fun. So high recommend. 7 issues, well worth it. Can't wait till the hardcover comes out. It's inevitable. And high recommend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I told Brian about that story as well. I think I had told you, I may have said it on the podcast before, driving home from picking up those books that roared when you opened them, and they went off as I turned a corner, and I was like, what? Like, yeah, it was hilarious. All right, up next, excuse me, another book that I had a chance to talk to the writer before it came out. This time it was a couple weeks in advance. Talked to Tom King a few weeks ago about specifically this issue of Wonder Woman number 9, Sacrifice Part 2, written by Tom King, Daniel Sampere on art, Mora and colors, Clayton Cowell on letters. In Tom's own words, 3 different ways that the Sovereign is trying to break Wonder Woman down. The first one being what he did last issue with Lasso of Lies. This one with having her in isolation. Next one, something to do with Cheetah. We'll see how that all plays out. And so brilliantly drawn by Daniel here, what Wonder Woman does, she kind of goes inside her own mind, manifests a version of Steve Trevor that she talks to, and it helps keep her sane, helps make her feel like she's not alone. So many great lines in this about why Wonder Woman is better than Batman and Robin. There's this sequence, and it talks about Superman's been killed, Batman's had his back broken, Wonder Woman remains undefeated. We can argue about that. I mean, she's suffered defeats before at the hands of various villains or what have you, but at the end of the day, she always comes back. But I just thought it was really fun and really interesting. Where this really comes home is the end, right? When the Sovereign goes to her cell, and she's been there for weeks, if not months, and opens it up, and she's there. She's still Wonder Woman. She's still, ready to go. And she's just like, all right, what do you got for me next? I mean, that kind of says it all for who Wonder Woman is, and the strength of her character, and the strength of her will, and the strength of her resolve. So in terms of who Wonder Woman is as a character, again, we only need that one page. But for me, where the issue shines is how often we're reminded of that in the art by Daniel Sampere, whether it's walking, whether it's riding a horse, as you can see on the screen right there, in the Old West, or it's walking on the beach with Steve Trevor in a romantic setting, which is maybe my most favorite piece of Daniel Sampere art ever. I mean, it is just gorgeous. Like when I first saw that, even though it was digital, I was like blown away. I was taken aback. I was like, oh my God, it's just gorgeous. And so, it's no wonder that that this book has been nominated for an Eisner. I expect it to win, to be honest with you. It's just so good. It's so amazing. And Daniel's been nominated as well. So anyway, I love this issue. And it's sort of a toss-up. Like so often we talk, especially when we had the young Diana backups, it was so incongruent, right? We talked about how it just didn't go with the main story that was being told. But we were not that we were particular fans of the main story that was being told in that era of Wonder Woman. But these backups have been a lot more fun. But this is the first time it's sort of a toss-up. I think I got to give the nod to the main story. But this backup is a close second. This was the closest a backup has ever been in this era of Wonder Woman, in the Tom King Wonder Woman era. The closest a backup's ever been to being more my favorite than the main. Like the backup was so fun. But we'll let Rocky talk about the main story, then we'll talk about the backup. What do you think of the main story?
When I should probably save my rant for when I travel to your place this coming week, and over some whiskey I can let loose. I understand everything you just said. I make note of. I get it. I understand what Tom King was trying to do. I just find this was absolutely beautifully rendered. Daniel Sampere, the scenes are absolutely fantastic in service of a story that is just was utterly boring to me. This is a repeat of last issue minus the Lasso of Lies. And, I interpreted that. It's funny that when you read the Batman, Batman's back was broken and then Superman was killed by Doomsday. And what's Wonder Woman's big test? The Sovereign. What has the Sovereign done? Wrapped her in a magic rope that she defeats in an issue, and then he basically treats her like a prisoner, puts her in a solitary confinement. Ooh. This to me doesn't. This is not excitement to me. This does not. This is Wonder Woman decides that she's trying to salvage her mind by talking to a rat, which is actually in my mind as a story that actually made the most sense to me because she can talk to animals. Wonder Woman talks to rats, talking to a rat, maintaining a conversation with a rat, maybe talk with the rat to figure out how to get out of there, talk with the rat to communicate with other animals. But that's not why Tom King wrote this. Tom King, as you said, he's doing the three things while she defeats the lasso of lies. We didn't know anything about the lasso of lies. We really kind of, so her defeating it, okay, well, she defeats it one issue. It was disappointing. It was just one issue. Here, she's basically in solitary confinement. And it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. But it's just, I just find it boring. I just really find it boring. And what's the point here? What's the Sovereign's endgame? And Wonder Woman did say here as a hint that the Wonder Women, the other Wonder Girls, she's in here for 2 months. She's in this thing for 2 months. And no one, and I realize Tom King is telling his own story. I get it. But even when he wrote City of Bane, he at least had an explanation as to how the other heroes couldn't help the Bat family out in Gotham. Here, there's nothing. Wonder Woman's gone for 2 months, and no one seems to, nobody seems to care. I get it. That's not the point of this story. The point of this story is to focus on Wonder Woman's inner mind, how strong she is, how her inner will and her compassion, her inner will and her love and her determination. She can defeat her enemy. She will not be broken. I get that. I do. And in that respect, it's pretty cool. Boring. What's that?
You just think that all that's boring.
I do. I just think I'm just disappointed in it because I really was expecting more. Now, I will give him this. If more of this, he's only at the beginning of this run and he's going to have a longer run. And we did get a real kick-ass issue of, I'm not saying I need every woman with Wonder Woman fighting the U.S. Army. I just, this one here, I really was expecting more. This was, in my mind, this was the same psychological sort of gymnastics that Wonder Woman played last issue. And then next issue, I guess if she's battling the cheetah, I mean, well, I guess I'll have to wait and see that. But I'm just, if you're the Sovereign, I guess I need to know more about the Sovereign. And this might be a situation where when I find out more in subsequent issues, I'll appreciate this issue more because I just don't see, I mean, why doesn't the Sovereign just kill her? If he's got Lex Luthor super tech, which by the way, if that's a thing, I'd like to know where he got that from. That was a made up thing, but I'd like a little bit more substance backing up this. What's the point? What's the Sovereign doing? None of this is real. It's all taking place in her head. So how do we know that even reference to the news thing is even real anyway? Because it's all completely in Wonder Woman's mind. She's got no contact to the outside world. How does the Wonder Girls, if they were planning something, Wonder Woman is suggesting that she knows exactly, she seemed to anticipate this. Wonder Woman anticipated being in solitary confinement for 2 months. And then anticipated and had the Wonder Girls go, like, all this stuff again, I can appreciate the beauty of this individual issue for what it is, but as a story, this just continues to fall apart, like just fall by the waysides. The substance of this story, I just don't feel that anything's at stake other than the Sovereign, sitting in another room, probably playing with himself, watching Wonder Woman in isolation, talking to rats. And eating one of them.
You can have your opinion. I'm never going to be one to say, your opinion's wrong or what have you. But I sort of feel like we're not reading the same story here. So, you're like, what's the point? Why does the Sovereign just kill her? He said throughout, the point is to break her, right? Like, look who the Sovereign is. Look at what the Sovereign's dreams would be. The last issue with the Lasso of Lies was all about convincing Wonder Woman that she was a housewife in the 50s, for lack of a better way to put it, right? Like, if you want to talk about the big idea or whatever, you're subservient to man. You do what you're told. You bend your knee. He says it at the beginning of this issue. He says it at the end of this issue. He wants to break her. He doesn't want to kill her. That's the easy way out. He wants to break her. He wants her to beg. He wants her to kneel before him. He wants her to admit she's lesser. Partly because she's a woman, partly because she's Wonder Woman and he's the Sovereign, and how dare you? That's what it's about. do we need to know more about the Sovereign? Would it help? Yeah, you could make the argument that if we knew more about him and had more context, there would be more gravitas to the story, and we can understand the kind of the intellectual battle between them better. I'll give you that. But I feel like I understand his motivations. I feel like Tom King has done a good job of that. In terms of this being the same as last issue, again, last issue for me was all about the Sovereign standing for lies, right? The Sovereign kind of saying, this is the way the world should be. This is the way I see the world. This is the way everybody should see the world. And Wonder Woman standing for truth, saying, no, that's not reality. That's not what really happens. I'm stronger than you. The truth is stronger than you. I'm going to use that belief and faith in the truth to break the lasso of lies and be able to withstand your attack on the truth, which if Wonder Woman stands for the truth, in a lot of ways, she's the embodiment of the truth. His attack on the truth is an attack on her. She withstood that. This one, as Tom himself, and I may not have picked up on this, I don't know because I didn't read this issue until I was about to interview Tom, so I didn't have a chance to really think about it without him having talked about this. But he talked about in the interview this idea of Wonder Woman being somebody who really is compassionate, right? And is empathetic. You can't be compassionate and you can't be empathetic if you're by yourself. So she is somebody who sort of, I don't remember exactly how Tom put it, but she's somebody who needs other people in a way, right? She needs other people to be a champion for, to feel empathy for, to feel compassion for, and what have you. So what an interesting way, if the Sovereign realizes that about Wonder Woman, what an interesting way to try to break her than to put her in solitary confinement for 2 months or however long it is. It's an extended period of time. I agree with you that it falls apart a little bit. There would be people looking for what have you. You got to kind of set that aside to let Tom tell the story that he wants to tell.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
a panel or two here or there going, where's Wonder Woman? We should be looking for her. We can't find her. Yeah, I guess you could have done that, but I think real estate was already at a premium in this issue. Maybe we'll get a panel or two in the next issue or what have you.
I do find I do find it incredible that Wonder Woman actually manages to find something to even communicate with, and that's even a rat. So her ability to talk with animals also contributes is how she saves herself. And I thought that was cool. I actually thought that was a cool element, is that the rats in the very cage in which she's contained in provides a recourse of her salvation and the way she comes through. So I liked aspects of it. I just, I expect this from Tom King. It happens every now and then because every now he'll write, depending on the character, and this one I just felt it was. Again, I get it. I was hoping for a little bit more, and I was hoping for a little bit more. I'm not sure. I got to reflect on it more. We'll talk more about it later. But
I get what you're saying. I just don't know how else you explore this aspect of her. She's somebody who needs people. So how do you exploit that? Will you put her in a place where she doesn't have any people? Like, that's sort of inherently boring, right? So I guess instead of her imagining Steve Trevor, she could have imagined being in battles. She could have imagined being with Batman. I remember the story, was it, I can't remember who wrote it. Was it Liam Sharp? Was it? Yeah, wasn't it in the Liam Sharp Brave and the Bold where Batman and Wonder Woman? No, where am I? Oh, it wasn't in. It was in Tom King's Batman run, right? Where him and Wonder Woman go and they fight this battle for like 1,000 years.
Yeah, and the Gentleman. They fought the Gentleman for 1,000 years. Yeah, and only.
She could have gone and done that. She could have been imagining she was with Batman somewhere. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm not going to play script doctor. I liked it. I'm sorry that you found it boring. What are your thoughts on the backup? Because
I want to get
backup was so good. So my wife, she's not a comic fan whatsoever, despite her giving it a try many, many times because she cares about me, and has been willing to give it a try at various times when I've said, read this, and I think you'll really like it. But she's just one of those people. She'd rather read a novel. She doesn't want the visuals. But she loves dogs. She loves dogs. So she read this and absolutely loved it. So that's maybe
Yeah.
the strongest endorsement I can give. So Belen Ortega is the artist who's also nominated for an Eisner. So congrats to her. Alejandro Sanchez on colors, Clayton Cowell on letters, obviously written by Tom King. These backups that are world's finest that are starring the new Trinity, as it were. So what were your thoughts?
I'm not a dog lover, and I thought this was hilarious. And corgis, I didn't even know that was what a corgi looks like. That's how little I know about dogs. And it was funny. Of course, the central bit of hilarity is that even when they change back to Damien and John Kent, they still act like dogs. They just happen to look human. So, maybe that says something about all of us. We're basically all dogs in the end, or we all act like dogs or puppies, and we're all we're all about, we're all looking to have fun and to be playful with others. And Damien and John, ultimately, they're like the super pets, the super sons, super pets. And it was hilarious. And it was, given the way these backups have gone before, it's always been John and Damien putting up with Trinity. And this is an issue where it turns it on its head. It's now Trinity has to care for like Damien and John Kent, only they're dogs, so it's even worse. And so she kind of gets a little bit her comeuppance here, and she bloody well deserves it because she's been a handful for them throughout her young life, as these backups have shown. And it's just really well done. I mean, it is, and frankly, my criticism of the backup, and I do have one, it's probably on the same level of the same criticism I have of the first story, and that is that the first story is beautifully drawn, and I understand what Tom King was doing. I just didn't resonate with me. This one, I still have some questions about the continuity of it all, which is really irrelevant. As a story, it's funny, it's entertaining as hell, and that's what's most important. I still say John and Kent, they're drawn like 17 or 18-year-olds. They're at least 28 and 29 years old in this story. If Trinity's 10 years old, they got to be at least 28 years old, both of them. But that's a nitpick. As a story, it's funny, it's entertaining, and besides which, who the hell knows what the state of continuity in the DC universe is going to be come September? And it's a good story, and maybe to embrace what Dan Didio used to say back in the day, he wished more people would just embrace a good story and forget about continuity so much. If it's a good story, enjoy the story for what it is, and maybe that's the lesson that I need to take this week.
Yeah, I mean, we know, according to Tom, that Belen, he asked her what she wanted to draw in the backups. She said samurai and corgis, not dogs or puppies, but specifically corgis. Last issue we had samurai. This issue we have corgis. And you could just tell she's having a blast. We get some great moments with the corgis looking very much like dogs and some dog-like poses. There's one where Damien is laying on his back and he's got his tongue hanging out and his paws are there and she's like rubbing his belly, and it's absolutely hilarious. And then the big splash page where the people on the street, it's a bird, it's a plane, no, it's a corgi, and it's showing Damien's butt. And if you're not a dog person, you don't know that corgis are known for what their butts look like. If you see a corgi walking down the street, their little bottoms, it looks like a loaf of bread. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like, a loaf of bread waddling down the street. And again, it's drawn very, very well by Belen. And then my favorite moment in the whole story is at the end when Trinity is lamenting, how much longer am I going to have to take care of these two? Ridiculous. And we see that the corgi that is John Kent falls asleep with a ball in its mouth. And then on the next page, when they wake up and John Kent is back to normal, he's got the ball in his hand and he's looking at it because he woke up with that ball in his mouth going, why do I have this ball in my mouth? And he's looking at it like, what the hell is going on? So yeah, I absolutely loved it. Not least of which because my wife really enjoyed it as well. And typically she doesn't enjoy comics. So yeah, probably up there for my favorite story of the year based on that amazing art from Belen Ortega. So, okay, up next we have John Constantine, Hellblazer, Dead in America, issue number 5. There's a prologue and an epilogue that are written by Cy Spurrier with art by the regular series artist Aaron Campbell with colors by Jordi Belair. And then there's 3 stories within. We have Nasha, I think it's how it's pronounced, Spurrier's the writer, but Kelsey Ramsey's the artist. Francesco Segala on colors and Steve Wands on letters. Then we have One Way Ticket from Aaron Campbell as the writer, actually, and John Pearson as art and colors. And then Suckers, written by Spurrier with John McCrae as an artist, Mike Spicer on colors, and Aditya Bidikar handles the lettering, except that one story that Steve Wands lettered. So interesting. It's the size. It's 1.5 sizes. It's 31 pages or 30 pages instead of, or 28 pages instead of the usual 20. So it's a little bit larger than a regular issue. It did feel like these 3 stories didn't necessarily flow that well together. But the through line with all of them, as John and his companions continue to search for the sand of Morpheus, and then continue heading west, the through line is this cynicism of America, right? The degradation of America, how so many people that are hurting and need help are unseen and ignored in a lot of ways, and it goes hand in hand with what Spurrier is trying to tell. So, overall, I think in terms of an issue, wanting to sell that as an idea, that America needs help and it's a very cynical place, and they would rather ignore people that need help than actually help them. I think on that level it works. In terms of actually reading these on a granular level and getting a lot out of them, I personally didn't. I think the first story, which is this old Indian guy walking along the road, lamenting kind of the way Native Americans have been treated, which is a huge generalization for the story and the actual real life events. But that was probably my favorite. The One Way Ticket's just about this guy who is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's stuck there. He wants to get back to Mesa, Arizona, where he's from, where his grandmother lives, because he's living on the streets there. He keeps talking about wanting to get home. He keeps being ignored, very much like Sixth Sense, because the guy is in fact dead. Again, there's just not a lot to get from there. And then the last one, Suckers, about the whole idea of chupacabra and cryptids and even things that are not real are sort of fought over, and what the truth is subjective and that sort of thing. Again, like granularly, there's just not a lot that I got out of that story. So this is one of my least favorite, if not my least favorite issue of the series so far. I think on a high level overlook of it, I think it does what it's supposed to do, sell this idea of cynicism that Constantine feels for where America is while he's on the search for Morpheus's sand. And it definitely sets up an interesting issue going forward, because they're going to be in Las Vegas, which, John Constantine, the depravity of Las Vegas, the cynicism of the story overall, and magic and Morpheus. And I mean, yeah, I'm in, right? It sounds like there's a lot of potential there for story. But in terms of this standing alone on its own, it was a bit of a disappointment. It was one of the issues that underwhelmed me this week for sure. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I didn't understand the last story, Suckers, by Simon Spurrier. I didn't really understand that. I didn't understand it. So I don't have anything to comment. I've read it 3 times and I just don't get it. But this guy dresses up like a dinosaur and then he turns into an animal. I didn't get it. But I really like the first and second one. I actually thought that they were really good. The first story, I really liked the idea of this old Indian spirit, or this not an Indian spirit, but he's an Indian person whose daughter had died on the road of the Highway of Sorrows, or whatever it might be, where a lot of young Aboriginals go missing, and just the way that and just how it sort of reflects and makes one reflect on the history of the Aboriginals in North America. And they've had, I know in Canada here, we have a very tragic history in terms of how we've treated our Aboriginals over the last 100 years. And I know America, you didn't treat them much better. And we never do them much justice. So kudos to Sampere. So really sort of hitting the heartstrings here. Just how truly, utterly, unbelievably tragic and horrific it was in terms of what happened to First Nations in North America, and in this case, in that portion of America. And you're right. You sort of hinted how our quick reviews that we do just don't do the story justice. You really have to read it itself to appreciate the emotions involved, and literally the spirits and even this is this is about an older Aboriginal man who isn't much who by his own admission isn't a particularly religious person. He's not really one. It's not like he's a diehard religious. Even he doesn't even follow his faith. He didn't even listen to much of the stories that his elders told him when he was younger. But it's his daughter who he had a terrible relationship with. But that's not the point. It's still a loss. But even his own story, how he's forgotten the stories and he never paid attention to the story of his elders. He never paid much attention to his daughter. There's a tragedy even in his personal story, as well as the overall story of First Nations itself. And I think it was very, very powerful. And like you said, Sampere is saying something about America. Granted, it's not necessarily nice what he's saying about America, but it's a mirror to aspects or portions of America, which may or may not ruffle readers the wrong way, depending on the reader. The middle story about this, where with the grain of sand, John Constantine comes across a person who is wondering. Basically, comes across a ghost, and it's a ghost of a homeless person that's died in the city, and ultimately, and I think it's because something to do with the sand, that one of Morpheus's sands. Bits of sand, which I don't know why this, John Constantine basically helps this soul find, a path back to, a path to heaven, or find the light, I guess, or just goes back to where this ghost, this person doesn't know that he's dead, and so John Constantine makes sure that the body of this person finds its way home. Again, it's very, very tragic. These are individual stories of random Americans with very different stories, and he's done that throughout these issues, and very, very powerful stories. And but I admit, but then he comes out with a story like the final one, where this guy dressed in a dinosaur suit. I just didn't get it. And I will fall upon my sword, because you were nice enough to explain to me the story the one time, and I appreciated it. But this final story I didn't get. But overall, I will say Sampere, he does challenge me, and he makes me think, and I'm the better man for it.
Yeah, the last story, the guy that actually leaves the bus, we're supposed to believe is a chupacabra who killed the guy. The guy throughout the story that's in the dinosaur costume.
Yeah.
Was killed by the chupacabra that he supposedly captured, and was on that bus to have tests run to prove that chupacabras are real. And so the chupacabra wasn't really dead, and killed everybody in the bus, and killed him, and took his form, and went off to still be mysterious and not found.
Oh, okay, that's what threw me off. He took his form. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's still not a good. It's still not a good.
Yeah,
story.
I never. That wasn't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the only reason you know that is because the girl goes on the bus. Yeah, the girl goes on the bus, and Constantine is kind of ahead of the game, and he says, "Yeah, let me guess, one of the bodies in there that has no face has ID on it that has that guy's name," and that's how you know it's that guy. So, Anyway, moving on. Superman number 14. Let me get the credits in front of me. Written by Joshua Williamson. Art is by Rafa Sandoval and Miguel Mendoca. Colors by Alejandro Sanchez. Letters by Ariana Mayer. This is the latest chapter of the House of Brainiac. Part 4, Last Sons. Oh my God, what a splash page. Superman and Lobo going at it. And so there is plenty of action in this issue, but really what I liked about the issue is not necessarily like I told you so, or to say, oh, this is exactly what I expected. But once Brainiac is able to provide sentience, I guess you'd say, or awakens the Queen Brainiac. Um, at that point, all the Zarnians are all sort of useless to him. They're no longer needed, except as food for the Brainiac Queen, and she proceeds to literally eat them. And what's interesting is the Zarnians themselves are not so surprised. Even General Chakal's like, here comes the betrayal that they were expecting, all along. So sometimes it's nice, even though you're expecting things to happen. It's nice to know that you're right. It's nice to see, like, you're waiting for that other shoe to drop. And then when it finally drops, you're like, there it is. That's what I was expecting. So this continues to be a fun story. I will say that this issue, despite the action, the fight between Brainiac and Lobo at the beginning, and then some action in the bottled city. I don't remember if we're
Bottled City of Kolu.
Kolu, yeah, the bottled city of Kolu, taken from Brainiac's home planet. There's some action in there with Supergirl and Lex Luthor. Despite that action, this did feel like a little bit of a slower paced issue. But I think that just goes to kind of the way the structure of the event is playing out. Like, you have to kind of have an issue that's a little bit kind of a downturn in terms of pacing, so you can ratchet it up for next issue through to the end. So I really enjoyed this. The art from Rafa Sandoval, Miguel Mendoza was absolutely fantastic. This whole idea of Luthor still trying to justify his actions and seeing himself as a hero, I think it's playing relatively well. What's going to happen from here, the explanation of why Brainiac is doing what he's doing, are all really well done. Kudos to Williamson for pulling back all the way back to things like Justice League No Justice, and the Scott Snyder run of Justice League, through to the Year of the Villain. It's all making sense that we're building up to this. And typically I'm not used to Williamson going and pulling back from stuff like that's like a Jeremy Adams thing to do. Williamson's doing it to a T, like perfection. So this is my favorite Superman event in quite a while. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, it's Mark Waid, so I'm holding out hope, but I wouldn't be surprised if I end up liking this House of Brainiac story more than Absolute Power. Maybe because it's just a little more contained, a little more focused. It's more of a Superman story as opposed to the whole DCU. And it has less Amanda Waller. That's a big consideration. So anyway, what do you think of this?
Rafael Sandoval, his art's absolutely fantastic. This is the Brainiac Queen she looks so absolutely just gorgeously rendered, and just she's so viciously, devastatingly vicious and evil, and the way she decimates the Zarnian army there, and just goes through them and just decimates them. And she's obviously extremely powerful. If she can go through the Zarnians like basically like a knife through butter, like, oh my God, I think she could probably quite handily destroy Superman. So you can definitely see how this Brainiac Queen's going to be a threat if she's one of the trinity of power in Absolute Power, and they got to deal with Failsafe and the forces of Amanda Waller on top of that. That's quite something. I love the fact. I mean, I lamented the fact in when we reviewed previous issues in this chapter of the House of Brainiac that there was a couple moments where I thought Lobo was getting a little bit too emotional, too touchy-feely with Superman, and saying things that were out of character for Lobo in terms of, some of the comments that he made. This is finally Lobo in true form. Of course, Lobo's going to betray Superman because he gets to lead a Zarnian army. And so I love seeing that. I love seeing the betrayal. This is so true to who Lobo is, and the fact that he's happily willing to beat the crap out of Superman. And he wants to do it himself, so he doesn't even like when General Shakal gives him help and wraps the chains around Superman before they haul Superman into Brainiac. Meanwhile, in the bottle city of Kolu, we've got Supergirl and Lex Luthor, who have eventually run into Vril Dox, who is the son of Brainiac, And of course, where's that going to lead to? I mean, ultimately, what does Vril Dox might know that can help them defeat Brainiac? Are they going to be able to escape the bottle city of Kolu? We don't know. So more seeds are being planted for future issues. We got a interesting bit of dialogue between Brainiac and Lena Luthor. We still don't know exactly. As Luthor said to her, he said, "You're that." Lena Luthor's mind is both a gift and a weapon, and Brainiac tells her, because this all started with you, and she's going to bear witness to what will happen. Well, it's interesting. If Brainiac has her captured, I'm sure that Brainiac or the Brainiac Queen will want Lena Luthor more than simply to bear witness. I mean, what do they actually want Lena Luthor for? And if some of this, if examining the mind of Lena Luthor was such that it led Brainiac on the path of creating this Brainiac Queen, what is it? Maybe Lena Luthor can access some of her memories because she doesn't remember. She says she doesn't remember much of her past. Maybe at some point Lena Luthor will remember her past, and that will lead to some clues that will ultimately aid in the defeat of all the bad guys in absolute power. We'll have to wait and see, or at least at the end of this House of Brainiac. I thought this was excellent. I agree with you. This is probably one of the best Superman events. I enjoyed PKJ's Superman action run. I love that on Mongol, and I love that, and I love this too. So it's once again, I love the fact that we're on our second, third year in a row where it's a great year to be a Superman fan.
Yeah, 100%. Can't disagree with that. All right, last book we're going to talk about in details: the Batman First Night, issue number 3, final issue, written by Dan Jurgens. Art and cover by Mike Perkins, colors by Mike Spicer, letters by Simon Boland. 54 pages of Black Label goodness. So what do you think?
I am sorry, it's just taken me a little bit longer to load this up. I took the liberty of rereading the earlier issues on this because I gave the last issue short thrift. You did most of the talking because I only had skim read it. And boy, am I glad I did. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. And I don't know if it's because I love history, but lots of people say they're a history buff. Well, it just so happens that when I did study history, a lot of what I studied was the 20th century, and particularly, of course, the early 20th century and the first 2 world wars. And so this just sort of resonates with me. And I love this Batman, this Gregory Peck looking Batman, who is, he's kind of a study. He finally sleeps with the movie star in this issue, which is awesome, and I love the fact that there's an explanation for everything. The reason these monster men, it ends up that one of the minions of the mayor, this corrupt cop, ends up being the mastermind behind everything. And he actually utilizes they electrocute men, and just before they die, just before they're near death, via electrocution, they're injected with something which turns them into these creatures which basically do the bidding of the villain here, whose name I'm sorry, I didn't take any. I'm going off memory here. I can't remember the villain's name.
The Voice.
The Voice, that's right, The Voice. And, even the name The Voice, and this is, I'm so, I love the fact that it is The Voice, because when you think of the 1930s, the mid to late 1930s going into the war, you think of The Voice, that's really all they had. They didn't have TV. They had the radio, and power was in the voice. Radio, you think of the War of the Worlds, Orson Welles, it was the power of his voice that made people think there was actual alien invasion. So the fact that the primary villain in the 1930s is called The Voice, I mean, I kind of like that. Kudos to Dan Jurgens for just naming him The Voice. I think it's inspired. The art here is fantastic. Mike Perkins here and Mike Spicer on colors. This has the feel of the time period, and I got to tell you, I kind of wish this was a regular series. I would have liked this to have been a 12-issue series. Although I will grant you that at 54 pages, this is 3 issues long, but about 54 pages each. This is probably the equivalent of whatever 12 issues. So I'm glad we got it in three in three compilations like this. This was really good. This had the art is just incredible. I'm wondering. I think you interviewed Dan Jurgens. I'd like to know how long it took Mike Perkins to actually draw all 3 of these issues. Was he working on this for longer than a year? Do you know?
I don't think so, but I don't know for sure how long
Because
it
it's
took him.
impressive. It really, really is impressive. The attention to detail, if it is just, and again, we just can't do it justice on when we just give these quick reviews. But just the portrayal, every scene, the detail of each scene, each face is individualized. Nothing's blurred out. The colors just sort of pop off the page. You even get a feel that this is the end of the Gilded Age. We're past the 1920s. We're into the 1930s. We're on the cusp of a world war. The threat here. I mean, I really appreciated the reference on the radio broadcast, even about how the persecution is starting against the Jews in leading into the end of the 1930s, where even America was rejecting Jews fleeing Germany. Just that famous book, None is Too Many, where America was one of many countries that rejected the Jews fleeing Germany before World War II started. And so we're all, Canada was my country. I'm shameful to say we was also another country that rejected Jews. Nobody wanted the Jews. Why did Hitler persecute and exterminate so many of them? Hitler could legitimately say, see, no one else in the world wants the Jews either. Anyways, not to go off on a tangent, but that underscores a lot of the times here and how Bruce Wayne feels differently. Bruce Wayne has foundations where he's actually actively trying to get Jews out of Germany, and that's revealed here. And so you see that Bruce Wayne, in his philanthropy, he's working behind the scenes. And he doesn't brag about it. He just does it. Of course, all part of his facade, all part of his role as being Batman. Just so there's all of this. What I just talked about was only, was just like background noise on the radio. The voices in the background of this story tells so many. Hints at the larger narrative and the larger world which that takes place with this new Batman has his adventures in. And I thought this was just really well done. And I'm so glad I I reread the second issue and going into the third because I really enjoyed this. And I highly recommend this for somebody who just, we live in a day and age of comic books where it's impossible to read a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. I mean, an ending is hard to find. This one has it all. And especially if you're a lover of, a good, war stories or, pre-war stories, this is definitely one to check out. What do you think?
Yeah, I loved it as well. This idea of telling a story, a Batman story that is when he's at his earliest days, where it's not a situation where he's got Alfred, he's got all the support, but and still have it fit into continuity. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Like it's like Dan said when we had him on. It's not that he's going out of his way to contradict anything, but even though this is Black Label, there's nothing in here that means that it couldn't actually be in continuity if you think about it. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think it really works. And then the art, by Mike Spicer is absolutely fantastic, as you mentioned as well. I don't think there's any part of the art that doesn't really, really work. One thing I'll correct you on. So it wasn't the mayor, it was the warden of the prison, and it was his head of guards who turned out to be the voice. But just the surety that and the confidence that Bruce Wayne shows, or the confidence that grows throughout the story from him questioning himself early on, even though he's at the beginning of his career, kind of shows the heroism that's inherent in who Bruce Wayne is. And you couple that with the Mike Perkins art, like you mentioned, where and Mike talked about this, how he did base the characters on people, on movie stars of the time and what have you. You mentioned Gregory Peck, so it lends this sort of real world aspect to the story and it really sells it. So I'm hoping selfishly that we get more of Dan Jurgens. I mean, Dan Jurgens, the man's written some of the greatest Superman stories of all time, right? Including the death of Superman. Here he's showing how good he can be at writing Batman stories. I would love some more Batman from Dan Jurgens. And if Mike Perkins is along for the ride, then that's great too. And I also found the scene where the movie starlet shows up and Bruce Wayne has a little fun time with her. That was interesting as well. Like, all right, here we go. It's all good. Bruce getting a little recovery time, as it were. That was fun. That was fun. So anyway, that's going to do it for the books we're going to talk about in detail, everybody. So time for book of the week. Oh, actually, no, sorry. Let's do collections first. There's quite a few this week. World's Finest Teen Titans hardcover, which collects the recent Mark Waid written World's Finest Teen Titans, issues 1 through 6. Then we've got Batman Black Mirror. There's a deluxe edition and there's a hardcover deluxe edition. That's Scott Snyder's first work on Batman from way back in Detective Comics 871 to 881 with art by Jacques. We've got Superman Son of Kal-El, Volume 3. That collects, I think it goes to the end of the series. It's issues 11 through 15 of Superman Son of Kal-El, written by Tom Taylor. We've got Fables, the deluxe edition hardcover, book 16, which collects issues 151 through 162. Those are the issues that Bill Willingham and Mark Buckingham came back to write recently. Then we've got DC Pride, Love and Justice hardcover, which collects the DC Pride number 1 from last year, as well as some stories from New Year's Evil, Mysteries of Love in Space, and Young Monsters in Love, 144 pages. And then we've got Barkham Asylum trade paperback, which is in the YA line. It's a trade, 160 pages, $12.99. And it basically tells the story of the Joker's dog, Jester. So that's
gotta love that title. Love that title.
Yeah, Barkham Asylum. Yeah, it looks like it's a heck of a lot of fun. I don't know much more about it than that, other than to say, yeah, it looks like it's a lot of fun. And then finally, we have 3 trades that are collecting some of the DC properties that are being read on Webtoon, and they're doing fantastic from my understanding. The numbers are great on them. Batman Wayne Family Adventures Volume 4, which collects episodes 71 through 116 of the Webtoon. Then we've got Zatanna and the Ripper Volume 3, which collects episodes 24 through 36 of the Zatanna and Ripper Webtoon. And then finally, Vixen NYC Volume 5, which collects episodes, doesn't say which ones it collects from her Webtoon. But look for that if you are so inclined. So now, Rocky, book of the week. Easy choice, hard choice. What do you got?
It was an easy choice for me. I got to go with, actually, the more I talked about it, I as much as I enjoyed Batman First Night, I got to go with Godzilla versus JLA, Godzilla and Kong. I got to go with that one. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm glad you picked that. I was just saying to Brian when I had him on, it's like, I don't know that we've ever had a week where I haven't picked Godzilla versus Kong, but it's got so many great books this week. I thought Superman was fantastic. I thought Batman First Night was fantastic. I'm going to go with Alan Scott Green Lantern. Again, just showing the power of what you're able to do with the character that's been around for decades, able to, to go back and tell, other stories, and expand on what's been told about those characters from the past. So I'm going with that with an honorable mention, because again, I think that there's a lot to be said for that Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong as well. So, all right, well, that's going to do it, everybody. Appreciate you all joining as always. Don't forget to make sure you subscribe to Rocky's YouTube channel, Comic Space Boom ! On YouTube. If you're curious about the other audio only content on the Comic Source, there's over 2,000 episodes, past reviews and interviews and convention coverage or what have you. Just go to wherever you get your podcast, whatever platform or app you use to search for the Comic Source and subscribe. Going forward, all the Comic Source content is on our YouTube channel. So just head over to the Comic Source on YouTube and subscribe. Spawn dailies there, all our interviews, everything that you would hope to see. So that's going to do it for this episode. As always, we appreciate everybody joining as always, and we hope to see you at Phoenix Fan Fusion.
Catch you later.